Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. I have an exciting guest to share with you guys, Ramin Farhood. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Tom? Good to be
I'm
here.
awesome. Yeah, I'm awesome. I'm excited. I had your buddy Kirk Shepard, your partner, Kirk
Yep.
Shepard here recently, and now we're having you here. And just to guys, just to share, we the MSL Talk podcast has a partnership with the OVN network, Oncology Voice Network, which was founded by both Kirk and Ramin and Rebecca too. And I'm excited, to share this with you guys so that you can learn more about it. So, Ramin, you want to tell everybody what that is before we get into the actual podcast episode?
Yeah, sure. So, Oncology Voice Network, it all started with actually a book about a couple of years ago. We had the idea that both Kirk and I, and as a lot of our colleagues, have gone through the drug development, and it's really been in siloed, and the communication between the different groups and different functions is sometimes it's challenging, and we realized that especially after the success of Medical Affairs Professional Society, we thought that maybe there is something here that people need to have a home for drug development overall with all different functions. We started talking to some of the leaders and executives, and they suggested to write a book, quite honestly,
Mhm.
about this thing. And before you know it, there was 33 executives and senior leadership that we interviewed in 24 chapters. The book was just released about a month ago, and as we were going through the process, there was ideas about how do we bring the book to life and how do we bring the best practices and ideas and lessons learned to the community and build a community around drug development in oncology. And that was the birth of Oncology Voice Network.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, and good luck with everything, guys. If you're interested, go check out the book on Amazon. I think it's available, right? And I think it's a
Yeah,
four. I think
it's available.
Forbes was behind it, right?
Wobbles
Wasn't that
was
a part of it?
behind it, and so do a lot of other people. It was
Yeah.
definitely a work of a lot of great people.
Awesome. Amazing. And let's tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm sure there's some folks out there that may not, I mean, probably maybe two or three. Everybody knows who Ramin is.
I'm sure
But
there's a lot
but
more than
yeah.
that, Tom.
Yeah.
Uh, I've been in the industry side for about 25 years. Started my career in industry. I've always been in global medical affairs. I'm pretty much always in rare diseases, ultra rare diseases, multiple different therapeutic areas. My experience and my work started with Baxter and moved on to Baxalta and Shire, and then from there to Avexis and Novartis. And just about 5 years ago, I started working in a consulting firm called SSI Strategy. Um, I'm one of those people that has been always hands-on on medical affairs and working on the many multiple different launches at different times and working with families and KOLs and healthcare providers to bring products to the market, building the capabilities of medical affairs and pretty much exclusively in global roles with the countries and affiliates part of our organizations, depending on the company, sometimes directly part of my team, sometimes in the metrics organization, but it's still been in a global role pretty much all my career. It's been pretty exciting. Learned quite a bit.
Yeah, no, you've certainly done a lot, and you mentioned MAPS before. I know you've been involved with MAPS, the Medical Affairs Professional Society. So, guys, if you're not a member of MAPS or at least following along, I definitely highly recommend. I think that
Absolutely.
MAPS is definitely the premier
It is.
organization in medical affairs. Yeah. So, and get to the meeting, get to the national meeting in March. I'll definitely be there. MAPS is my favorite meeting of the year. So check it out. All right. What we're going to talk about today, guys, is launch excellence, wins, wobbles, and lessons learned. I don't know where we come up with these titles, but so I guess let's talk about like what would define a successful launch, like beyond sales numbers and market share, which obviously we're ultimately trying to get to.
Right. As a company, ultimately, we're trying to get to that. But as you know, in from a medical affairs perspective, we don't even look at those numbers. We don't even have
Exactly.
preview of those. It really comes down to the patient impact. I think that's by far something that comes to my mind is are we making a difference in patient lives with the new product, new treatment coming to the market? Is it measurable? Is it sustainable? Are the patients are actually taking the treatment, seeing a change in their lives? And the access is sustainable, because that's really truly one important aspect of launching any product. Is the patient getting the benefit? Do they have the access to it? And are the KOLs and healthcare providers are actually adopting the products and using the product for their patients?
Which would be considered a successful launch. So I'm sure they're not all successful. So
Oh, no.
can you share like a story or experience maybe that you had of a launch that didn't go as planned, and what kind of lessons can we learn from that?
One thing I definitely learned is that most of the launches never go as you plan.
Okay.
Everything looks beautiful in the office and on the on the PowerPoints, but
Yeah.
once the actual launch comes, you gotta stay agile and flexible and change plan and course correct as you learn new things. But definitely, a few things that comes to my mind is engaging with the external stakeholders, the patient organizations, the patients, the KOLs, the payers. That's definitely one part that I've seen multiple times, not just my own experience, but also working with other companies that we get them involved too late. And as a result of that, we get behind the actual value of the clinical value of the product and of the treatment. And by the time we're trying to have it, we're trying to kind of chase that and catch up. It's too late at that point. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is. Right? When you're launching product, everything needs to start with the end in mind, which is the patient, the KOLs, and the payers. There was way back when the payers were not really that important, but nowadays the payers are really have a strong voice, and you got to listen to what's important to them in order to be able to bring the product to the patients.
Well, and that's a huge piece of it, that market access piece and the
Yeah.
reimbursement piece, and that the payer side is, I mean, it's crucial, and there's whole functions now that
Oh, for sure.
exist,
For
right?
sure.
Yeah, it's a different time right now. When so when you look back at like the successful like first in class launches, like what patterns would separate like the winners and the successful ones from the ones that struggled?
There's a couple of things comes to my mind. I mean, first of all, internally, the team needs to be aligned. And I don't mean just the medical team or the clinical team. I'm talking about medical, clinical, obviously the commercial team, regulatory, the whole organization, the whole enterprise need to be aligned about the why about the product. That's so important. It sounds very simple, but we see it every day. Companies missing that. And what I mean by being aligned and knowing the purpose of the therapy, right? What is the actual narrative about about the therapy that we want to communicate? What context we want to put it in? How are we educating our stakeholders, external stakeholders, the physicians, the KOLs, the patient advocacy groups? Those are all really important. A lot of times we think we're aligned, but we're not really aligned, and each group wants to kind of do their own thing or say their own thing, which creates that silos that we were talking about early on about oncology. And it's not specific to oncology. It happens to all the different therapeutic areas as well. So that internal alignment, incredibly important. What are we going to say about our product? Who is the product for? And how are we going to educate them on it? I think that's very important. Starting early enough is a key. You've got to give yourself enough lead time when you're launching a product, especially when you're first in the market. You want to make sure that you have enough time to educate, right? Again, the patients, the payers, and the scientific community, the clinical community as well. Those are internal things that you want to absolutely focus on. And again, I always go back to the external stakeholders, right? 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I started my career, that wasn't that important. Just make sure that we get the product out to the market, right? And then from there, we work with the clinicians and the KOLs and advocacy groups to figure out the right way to have the product available. But probably in the last 10 years, maybe even longer than that, that's not enough anymore. You constantly have to bring the insights back to the organization, hear what the patients are saying, advocacy groups are saying, what are the clinicians saying, what's important to them, and not just what's important to the company, and kind of find that right balance is critical, especially when you're first in the market.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of first in market, would you say, because it's so competitive now, so like you bring up a good point, but in this competitive landscape, is faster to market always better?
No, no, definitely not. I mean, it could be advantageous under specific and certain, I think, conditions, but faster to the market is not. I mean, one thing I learned is that you launch your product once,
Yep.
right? And you better make sure you're launching it with all the pieces in place, right? When you launch a product, there's a whole lot of education that needs to be in place, right? It's not just being available so people can order it. And that takes time, and that takes alignment internally. That education also takes time. You want to kind of prepare the market by going to different conferences, again, making sure the insights that you're hearing from the different stakeholders is also being implemented in your thinking and in your program and in your communication points and your scientific communication messages that you want to educate your stakeholders on. So fast is not only it's not necessarily good, it could actually be detrimental for the to your brand and to the product. Doing it the right way with the right pace, right, is incredibly important. And you don't want to shortcut any steps here. That's not going to necessarily. And I know from a commercial perspective, you always want to be the fastest. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And I understand that and I appreciate it, and it's an important perspective to keep in mind. But certainly, if you miss the steps, and a lot of times we do, that works out against you.
Yeah. Well, I know, and there's always a sense of urgency, it seems, with these launches, at
For
least the
sure.
ones that I've been involved in. So how do you find that right balance between urgency and patient safety when, like, during launch preparation?
I mean, first of all, the sense of urgency is important, right? You got to have that urgency because you're bringing a product to the market that is hopefully is going to make a change in people's life, right? In patients' life. So you don't want to kind of sit back and take your time bringing the product to the market, making sure everything is perfect and there is certainty because you're always going to be there is always going to be ambiguity, there's always going to be uncertainty, and that urgency is important. But you don't want to be so quick and so fast and that urgency driving you that you forget about safety. I think safety is actually, I see it as an enablers. I learned that from a lot of my great mentors throughout my career that safety needs to be part of your culture. And safety is actually something that can enable you to get to come to the market faster because one of I mean, the physicians, look, the physicians, patients, payers always have two questions in mind. Does your product work, right? And is it safe, right? And if you're not having the answer to both of them, right, and you can educate them with those two in mind, then there's always going to be hesitancy using your treatment. And you could even have the best data and the best science, but if you're not able to kind of demonstrate that and talk about that and bring and have the safety be part of everyday thinking. And it's really not just sometimes people think safety is just a drug safety and it belongs to certain functions or pharmacovigilance functions or sometimes clinical development. It's more across the enterprise. And that's really, really important, something to keep in mind that it needs to be part of your culture, part of your thinking. A lot of times the safety data that you collect, it enables you to bring the product to the market for the right patients, right? And helps with adaptations and the uptake in the market.
Right. And what about compliance? What role would compliance and medical governance play in keeping that launch
Really? Yeah.
momentum?
Right. Same thing. It got to be part of your DNA, right? Compliance, governance. Again look. I look at them as enablers. They help you make sure that you have the guard rails in place that you can bring product, your therapy to the market much faster with a lot more certainty, right? Remember, when we're educating, when we're in a conference, when we have abstracts, posters, when we have symposia, when we have advisory board, when we have all these different activities that a company does to bring a product in, when we're engaging with the stakeholders, you want to be able to talk about the safety of your product, right? And with certainty, you want to make sure that your compliance, that is not something that is going to come back and haunt you down the road. You want to make sure that you have the right governance in place, and cutting those corners almost all the time comes back and hunts you down at some point during the either pre-launch or even worse post-launch. You really can't hide any of these things, especially nowadays, right? That everything has to be full transparency, and that needs also another thing that needs to be part of your culture, right? People are going to find out. So you may as well better know what it is, talk about it, make sure that you work with your stakeholders to put it in the right frame of thinking and the frame communication, and take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know from the launches that we've been involved in, the importance. You always hear people talk about cross-functional alignment and why it's so important for the success of a launch. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it is. It's critical, and I tell you, it was a time at one of my previous roles. I was in front of the board, and they asked me exactly the same question, and I think I surprised them with my answer because I think they were thinking that my answer will be all about the external stakeholders, and they were asking me what's the most important thing in launching a product, and I said, alignment within the organization is the most important thing, which is about the question you're asking. I mean, think about it. If we are not aligned, first of all, we win as a team, right? When you're launching a product, it's a team sport. That's just how it is. You're either successful as a team, as a company, as an enterprise, or you're not. You're not going to have one function winning and three functions losing. We all win together, or we don't. We don't win together, right? It's one of those two. So what does that mean? One means that you got to be, if you're in silos, that means you're not communicating, right? And if you're not communicating, then there's lack of transparency. If there's lack of transparency, then there's lack of trust. The trust starts eroding. You don't know what the other team is doing. You're not aligned with them. And again, alignment and agreement is different, right? And sometimes we kind of use those interchangeably, which is not healthy either, and it creates some friction. But that alignment, internal alignment, helps you to have a purpose in mind as an organization with a mission in mind. It brings clarity, which is incredibly important, especially for smaller biotech companies and as well as big companies, right? That certainty and the mission, and have a clarity on the purpose and the why this treatment is good for the patient, it's more than half of the battle. And that's why I think it's so important. And part of it is really comes down to the communications. Teams are talking to each other. Usually they do very well. Teams that are kind of going silo, and there's no bad intention here. It's just everybody has their own kind of a area that they need to focus on, and they forget about reaching out, to the neighbors on either side, and we're making sure that we are all on the same page. And great leaderships and great leaders, that's what they actually do, right? They're able to kind of bring everybody on the same page, kind of forcing those tough conversations, right? And forcing those tough alignments, because alignment is not easy either. It's much easier. You cannot just go to a couple of meetings and say, okay, we're aligned with what they say. Usually go to meetings and you walk away from the meeting and say, well, I don't think I agree with that, or I'm not aligned with that. And great leaders bring everybody together to talk about those tough conversations. And that's why it's so critical.
Let's talk about what happens when that isn't the case. So, like, we know teams operate in silos very often. But in launch, as you talk about alignment, what tends to go wrong when teams wind up staying in their silos?
Everybody does their own thing, right? I mean, number one. So you may be great at what you do in your own function, but when you're launching a product, you're talking about 10 plus, maybe even 15, 20 different groups that they need to stand behind where the company is going and have a purpose in mind, right? So when you don't have it in place, ultimately the patient suffers. the decisions are delayed, right? The product doesn't get to the market, or when it does get to the market, it's so foggy that the clinician doesn't know which patient profile this drug is good for. They don't know all the data. You're sending mixed messages, and it could not, and it's not anybody's intention again, but it's if they don't know what this treatment is for, who is it for, who's going to do good for, they're not going to use it. And if they have other options, and most of the time they do, they use another treatment, or even worse, there may not be even another option, but they don't have that trust, right? So ultimately, the clinical community suffers because we did not do our job right internally, making sure that when we are launching the product, we are aligned about who this product is for, who is the treatment for, what are the benefits, what are some of the risks that you need to think about, and kind of go from there and build upon that.
What gets overlooked? Let's talk about some of the areas or aspects that get overlooked in a launch readiness strategy.
Key communication points. It always gets overlooked.
Hmm.
You see this with the small companies with 20, 30, 50 people. Typically, the CSO is probably the founder, or the CEO could be the founder, or the chief medical officer could be the founder, right? And everyone has a slightly different view. They start hiring somebody in the marketing and commercial. They come in, and that's their expertise, and they have a different view. And you see that in small biotech companies quite a bit. That is misalignment about what are we going to say about our product, right? And you see that even with companies with 100,000, 150,000 employees, launched maybe 50, 100 different products. It's such a simple thing, but it's not easy to do. You have to know few things, pretty much hands down. One of them is the unmet need. What's the unmet need, right? What is this therapy for? Who is it for, right? And alignment on that alone, just that one pillar, could be very challenging, right? Because each one of these groups have their own perspective, their own knowledge, their own expertise, right? And they're all great minds, by the way, right? It's not like people are not smart, but even just identifying what's the unmet need, that's going to be key. So once you align with that is, well, where does our product fit? Right? Our new therapy coming to the market within that unmet need. What exactly are we fulfilling for the patients? That's another level of complexity that we don't always align on. If you're new to the market and you have a new mechanism of action, agreeing on the mechanism of action, right? Sometimes it takes months and months and months just to agree on the MOA and how do we communicate it, how do we position it, and there could be a little bit of a misalignment there. But I mean, this misalignments doesn't have to be like black and white. It could be just a little bit of a misalignment, right? Once you figure those out, then the efficacy. What part of the efficacy are we communicating? How are we communicating? Who are we communicating to? Right? That becomes another one. The safety that you brought up could be another one. So those are like 4 or 5 key pillars,
Yeah.
right? That are really, really important and it gets missed all the time because of the urgency you brought up. We want to bring the product to the market. I mean, how many times can we talk about these different areas internally? We think we're aligned, but sometimes we're really not. The abstract and posters is saying one thing, the full paper says something else, right? The pivotal paper that is published may say slightly different, right? And again, doesn't have to be black and white difference. It could be just minor things. The sales rep may talk about it a little bit differently. The MSLs maybe have a slightly different view, and all of that combined, then your end user, which is the patient, the advocacy groups, the clinicians, the KOL, they're completely lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about, who is the product for, what is it for, how is it communicated, like it makes me think of the patient and patient insights.
Mhm.
So would you say that patient insights can or have directly shaped launch strategy and your experience, or maybe
All the
changed the
time.
direction of a launch?
All the time. I mean, look, when I started my career, we were not really talking about the patient insights. And it was maybe in the past 15 years, it started becoming a little bit more of a buzzword and companies that start hiring actually patient focused functions and building those functions up. But for sure, in the past decade and maybe in the past 5 years and even longer than that, it has become a critical part of the success of any organizations. And you have patients, officers now within the companies because that's so critical, right? I mean, think about it. If you're ultimately your product is for the patient, you want to know what they're
Right.
thinking, what they think is the most important thing, right? We think internally we have all the answers, and we do some of them. We do have some of the answers, but certainly not all of them, right? And the patient is the one that, with their experience, with the journey that they have gone through, with the insights that they have, and there are a lot of great, smart patients out there that they're willing to share that information with you, right? And they want the product to be enhanced and treat the patients and the whole community better. And that's where it really comes in. The great launches starts with the patients in mind. The patients are part of advisory board. You go through a patient actually journey to have a really clear understanding what the patient goes through, how are they being diagnosed. A lot of the rare diseases and ultra rare diseases I've been involved in, even the diagnosis takes 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, right? And understanding what the patients actually go through by the time they get diagnosed, what symptoms they have had, what is the family members go through, especially in oncology and other rare diseases, is also very common. And that understanding shapes your whole thinking about what you communicate, how and when you bring the product to the market. If you're early on and you haven't even done your phase 3 study, it helps shape the clinical trial and the endpoints and the primary endpoints and the secondary endpoints. It helps you to kind of be able to communicate the right messages with the payers, right? And even with the agencies as well. So the sooner you get to the actually patient, which is pretty much right away, right? The better chance you have for a successful launch.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And looking at the future, well, even looking now, like how do you see the current launch model change or evolve now that we're in this digital and artificial intelligence world that's really started to embed itself in medical affairs and commercial functions?
Right. I mean, typically our industry is not early adopters with technology, right?
Mm.
But technology is an enabler. I think it's amazing what the AI and generative AI can do, and they can analyze the data for you, and something that it may take months or maybe even years to have big data to be analyzed and start making sense of it. They can all do that for you in matter of days or weeks. You still need that human aspect, right? To go through it, to analyze it, to have a better understanding and provide directions to what exactly it means and how it's going to impact ultimately the clinical trial, or how you're communicating the value of your product, or who you need to focus on. So it helps to accelerate everything. I just don't think it's going to replace what we do in our industry because it's so critical. I was on the phone the other day with somebody who was talking about the fact that the AI, it's helping the clinical trials to be able to kind of fine tune the endpoints of studies based on all the data is out there. So the clinical trial have a higher probability of success because you're making sure that you're collecting the right data in your studies. And I think it's just going to be amazing and very exciting to see the next chapter as we go through the trends with the AI and how it's being utilized.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's happening. It's here.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's
Right.
it's definitely it's upon us. So last question. So what advice would you give to a company planning their first launch?
Um, I guess few. I mean, we covered almost all of them. Think about the end user at right at the beginning, right? So don't wait until you have a product or you're halfway through your phase 3 or you're at the beginning of your phase 3 and not engaging with the patients, not engaging with the KOLs and the clinicians. Bring them on early on, as soon as you have that preliminary data, even from phase 1, you want to start thinking about uh, communicating and getting their advice and insights externally. I think that's going to be absolutely critical. Same thing with the payers. You got to start thinking about the payers early on because it's not just about the reimbursement, it's about the access for the patients, right? And if you come from that lens and that point of view, that's going to be really, really important. I'm a strong believer that everything starts with the end in mind, and that's the end in mind. So you better make sure that you got those kind of hands down and you're taking care of those. The agencies are also very important, especially if in a rare disease. A lot of times in a rare disease, ultra rare disease, there are no other options, and you have to educate the agencies as well, right? FDA, EMEA, or whatever part of the country or the globe that you're from that you need to kind of get there. You got to educate them and get them, bring them involved as well. If you have the time and hopefully you have, start thinking about educating the market early on, right? You got to make sure you have the right, posters, abstracts, the data, right? And that's going to be also critical. Pretty much early on, even before, right at the beginning of your phase three, you got to start thinking about what is the real world data that I need to generate. You can't wait until the product is approved and think about, oh, okay, so this is a limited label that I got. Now I got to go do another study or do some type of observational or registry to generate additional data. That's going to take another year, 2, 3 years, and who knows how is that going to all work out. So you want to start thinking about what are the data that my phase three study is not generating, right? And start thinking about that early. So it all comes down to, I think, early preparation and the whole urgency and go, go, go. Sometimes we don't see that as clearly, and we get so much focus on what's in front of us today and not thinking about a few years down the road, and it hurts the launch of the product in the long term.
Yeah. Great advice. You heard it here, folks.
Yeah.
So if you are preparing for a launch, or if you know someone who is, you should definitely share this episode. Ramin, awesome. Awesome chatting with you. Thank you for coming on. This was a great chat.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome. And
Good
guys,
chatting
thank
with
you as
you.
always for joining us and for sharing the show and for all your support. Love you guys. Appreciate you all. We'll see you next time.
Bye.